Look forward to meeting you. Our topic tonight, is there a self? Our guest on the phone tonight says no such thing. And he's been on the program before. It's Professor Charles Goodman. And he's on the show tonight to tell us why the doctrine of no self should be adopted by us atheists over here at infidelguy.com. I guess everyone should have this idea that there's a concept of no self. I'm not so sure I'm convinced that is the case. Seems kind of intuitive to me that this self exists, at least in some way. Does the self, not exist absolutely? There's no self at all? Then who the heck am I going to be talking to tonight? Welcome to the program, Professor Charles Goodman.
And let me reassure you, Reggie, that I'm not going to argue for this particular piece of Buddhist philosophy, the doctrine of no self, on the basis of any kind of divine revelation, faith, or anything supernatural. I'm going to try to convince you and your listeners of this teaching using just rational arguments based on what I think you already believe.
Okay.
Now, Reggie, you're an atheist, and I bet you're a materialist too. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
I see. So then I take it you don't believe in anything that might be called a soul.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. And in fact, if I asked you to produce arguments against the existence of the soul, it wouldn't be that hard. You could, for example, point out that it's deeply problematic how this soul might interact with the body, and moreover, that there's no evidence of any kind for the existence of the soul.
Exactly.
Okay. So, Reggie, then, my guess is that you think that you are your body. Is that correct?
No. I'll say it's probably a little more complicated than that. I think there's a sum of many parts that make up the whole of what one would identify as me being the complete person that I am today.
Okay, now hold on.
Yes.
There are parts of you other than your body? What are they?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Well, okay, but typically when people say, I'm thinking body as just a single entity, but I'm talking about multiple aspects of my body, you have your different, as you know, brain has many different parts to it, actually, that would make up the mind, actually. I think that the mind is composed of many different aspects of the way our brain is formed. So I would say the same thing so when you say identify me as a person, it has more to do than not just the body itself, just as you would just say the body, has to do it also with the way I perceive, I think, I'm trying to say self, but I guess I would have to, but it would be circular if I did, but that is how I would view myself.
I see. So let's try to be a little bit more precise about this.
Yes.
Imagine, for instance, that your brain was removed from your head, and suppose that there was another body someplace else that was just like your body. And imagine, scientists can't do this at the moment, but
right.
Soon they will probably be able to.
Okay.
That they connect the base of your brain to the spinal cord of this new body, and then somebody wakes up, and this somebody has all of your memories, all of your beliefs and desires, all of your goals and aspirations and intentions.
That's me.
But a different body. That would be you then.
That's right. Sure is.
Okay.
Still is me. Just two of me now.
Well, no, because the brain was removed from your previous body, so your previous body is now dead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were doing a cloning thing here, but okay, I got you. Understood. Okay, we're basically doing a body transplant.
A body transplant. So what you might think was a brain transplant, on your view, Reggie, is actually a body transplant. Okay. So when we talk about who you really are, what your essence is, what is truly you,
okay,
the rest of your body other than your brain doesn't really seem to have much to do with it, does it?
See, and that was my point earlier it's kind of, you're hitting on exactly kind of like where I was going with that, because of that issue. That's what I was talking about. It's more of the totality. I guess what I was trying to say is typically people make a mind-body distinction. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there really is one, for instance. It's hard to explain.
Well, I think that the distinction that is really going to be important for us is the form-matter distinction. But that will become clearer in a second, I think.
Okay, all right.
Reggie, I imagine that, like me and like many of your listeners, you've at least occasionally seen a Star Trek program. Have you ever seen a Star Trek program on TV?
Oh, here we go, the transport accidents. But yes, I'm a fan, I think, yeah.
Exactly. Now, in Star Trek they have these transporters.
Yes.
Obviously, nobody can build a transporter.
No.
But do you know that transporters are impossible to build?
No. Why would they be impossible to build?
There doesn't seem to be any reason why they would be completely impossible.
Right.
A civilization much more advanced than our own could build one of those things, probably.
Probably, right. I don't see why it would be impossible.
Okay, good. Now, imagine that you, Reggie Finley, walk into the transporter, and then on a planet, near the spaceship, somebody who looks just like you, talks just like you, thinks just like you, has all of your memories, beliefs, and desires, but does not have any of your original matter, appears on the planet, created by the transporter device.
Right.
In this case, would that person be you, Reggie Finley?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so there's no doubt in your mind then, Reggie, that what the transporter creates is not a copy of you. It's actually you, the very same person.
Of course. No. I mean, it can still be. Okay, this way it gets a little confusing. Of course, it is a copy, or say it's a replica of me, but it is still me at the same time, though. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a logical contradiction or not, but.
No, I don't want to insist on that.
Okay.
What I want to tell you is a story from a particular episode of The Next Generation in which Commander Riker returns on the Enterprise to a planet that he had visited 15 years before.
Okay.
When he was a young lieutenant. And at that time, he had been beamed down to the planet. And then they tried to beam him back up. However, unbeknownst to anyone, there was a transporter malfunction.
Right.
The result of this transporter malfunction was that while creating a replica of Riker on the starship, it didn't destroy the replica of him that was on the planet.
Right.
Okay, so now there were two of him, as you were saying earlier.
Oh, this is going to get complicated. I see where this is going. Oh, my gosh.
Now Reggie.
Because now they have different experiences, different perspectives.
15, 20 years later, they meet each other again.
They are now two different people, no doubt about it.
Two completely different people.
No doubt about it. That's right. That's true.
All right. Now, Reggie.
Yes.
Do you remember from high school geometry the principle that two quantities equal to the same quantity are equal to each other?
Like simple logic as well, but yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's a principle that's used both in mathematics and in philosophical logic, and it has a technical name. It's called the transitivity of identity.
Oh, I know where this is going because I see how this can also apply to just us as a whole, since even the individual, since we're always changing all the time as well, that we're never who we were just a few seconds ago.
Well, indeed, that is in fact where I'm going.
Yes.
Ultimately,
I figure. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Let's work carefully here, because I don't want to seem to just be stating things dogmatically, but to be arguing from premises. So,
right.
Here we have the commander and the castaway. Now, it seems that if the castaway didn't exist, the commander would be identical with the lieutenant. Right? Suppose that this transport accident never occurred. Since you, Reggie, believe that the person who comes out of the transporter is you.
Only at that instance, I would say, before it begins to learn new experiences because of its relative position toward the copy.
Now we're getting to the conclusion that you alluded to a minute ago.
Yes.
And I don't think you really want to say that, Reggie.
I know where it's going.
Imagine that you take one transporter trip in your lifetime.
Yes.
You move from Earth to Mars using a transporter. So you live the first 30 years of your life on Earth and the next 40 years of your life on Mars. Say you live 70 years. Now, if you had lived all 70 years on Earth, we would ordinarily have wanted to say that the person who lived all those 70 years was Reggie. If you, when you're 30, step into the transporter and arrive on Mars, 1 year later, you're 31, you're on Mars. Is that the same person as the Reggie who was born and named Reggie by his parents?
No.
You say no. Suppose you had stayed on Earth. By the time you got to age 31, would you be the same person that was named Reggie by your parents right after you were born?
No.
Okay, good. Now you see the problem. So you didn't have to give me that, but now you have.
Yes.
Here's what I'm telling you, Reggie. Okay, and now that we've started to see just the beginning of all the puzzles and paradoxes that surround this subject, I think it behooves me to state fairly precisely what I'm trying to say.
All right.
Imagine that we made a list of all the things that really objectively exist. So what is going to be on this list is all the things which have a kind of existence that is independent of mental construction and really out there in the world. The things which, as we might say, exist from their own side. Are you following me?
Okay.
What I'm saying is that Charles Goodman and Reggie Finley are not going to be on that list.
Okay, give me an example of what you're talking about.
Sure.
Yes.
Consider on the one hand an electron.
Okay.
Okay. Now, quantum mechanics is rather peculiar, but let's bracket that. Let's just suppose, as I think most atheists, especially atheist materialists, probably do suppose, that humans didn't make up this electron. This electron exists in and of itself, independently of anybody ever thinking about it. If nobody ever thinks of this electron or says anything about it or anything like that, independently of any conceptual scheme, it exists in and of itself, objectively in the world. Following?
Yes.
Okay, good. Consider, on the other hand, the McDonald's Corporation. The McDonald's Corporation exists. It would be foolish to deny that in some sense there is such a thing as the McDonald's Corporation. On the other hand, it doesn't exist objectively or from its own side. It's created by a kind of social practice. Because of the way we think about things, because of the way we talk, and because of the way a lot of people behave, the McDonald's Corporation has a kind of dependent, context-relative, conceptually constructed, conventional existence.
Okay.
Agreed? Okay, now what I'm telling you is that the way in which you exist is like the way the McDonald's Corporation exists and not like the way the electron exists. That there are people is conventionally true, so it has a certain limited kind of truth, but it's true only from a certain perspective.
Yes.
It's not really objectively or ultimately true. That's what I'm claiming.
Of course, right.
Okay, so now, according to the Buddhist tradition, if you were to manage to believe this, even intellectually, it would make you a little bit less selfish, a little bit less afraid of your own death, a little bit more altruistic.
What?
No, seriously.
Okay.
Because there's a very powerful tendency, probably a tendency put in us by evolution, to take incredibly seriously the distinction between you and me. Suppose you suddenly hear me say, ouch, on the telephone because I've stubbed my toe. Now, I feel that pain and you don't. You might take that to be something of great significance. So, imagine how you would feel if somebody said, terrorists are running into Charles Goodman's house to torture him to death. I imagine you'd feel somewhat concerned.
Yes.
Then imagine how you'd feel if somebody said, run, terrorists are running into our radio studio to torture Reggie to death. I'd imagine you'd feel rather different, wouldn't you?
Of course.
Okay, so according to the Buddhist tradition, the fact that you are vastly more concerned about yourself and the people close to you than you are about me or some random person in Africa is largely based on the fact that you take yourself to be an ultimately, really objectively existing entity. But once you try...
But you do.
Of course you do.
Yes.
This is called innate ignorance.
At any one time, yes. But I mean, I think you're right. I think you said ultimately or absolutely, there is no single self. But at that moment, at that instant in which you, it's almost like the self exists at particular points in time, but it doesn't mean that the self is consistent. Which I don't see why there would need to be that.
Okay.
That shouldn't need to be the case. It shouldn't be a prerequisite of identifying the self. Meaning that it has to be absolute, that it has to exist at all times. It can exist at particular points in time, and we still call it the self.
You're allowed to take back this concession later, but here's the way I understand our present position.
Okay.
You've agreed with me that there's no real objectively existing personal identity over time, but you're claiming to me that at a particular time,
yes,
there is a kind of unity to the person that constitutes a self, and that's enough to justify egoism. That's enough to make it make sense to care more for you to care more about you than you care about me.
Well, unfortunately, that is going to be the case.
Okay. Now, Reggie, first of all, everything that you do now is not going to have effects until the future. Sometimes the things you do have effects far in the future, and other times the things you do have effects in the near-term future.
Right.
But you can't do anything to change the situation in this exact instant. All you can do are things which will change the situation very soon. Agreed?
Right.
Okay. Then, if you have agreed with me that there isn't really any personal identity over time, there's no such thing as me 5 minutes from now, that's somebody else, then why should you have any more reason to do something that will benefit the person who will be in that studio 5 minutes from now, as opposed to the person who will be in my house 5 minutes from now, given that neither of them is you?
I would probably say my memory is the glue. That's probably what that would be it.
I see. So you really care about memory?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think memory is integral to us identifying what we believe is ourselves.
I agree. There's a view called the memory theory of personal identity, which says that what makes you you, in other words, what makes you now the same person you were 10 years ago, is that you can remember stuff that happened 10 years ago. Notice, however, that in our transporter case, both the commander and the castaway can remember what happened to the lieutenant. So if memory were what defined personal identity, both of them would be identical to the lieutenant, which we know is impossible by the
I'd also say reinforcement, of course, from our communities as well, because their memories of you, and that reinforcement can all the time continuously builds what we believe is the self. It's kind of interesting. I was talking about this the other day, actually, that when I refer to what I think is myself, I'm talking about I'm trying to, in funny, it's kind of weird, in a way I'm trying to construct what I think I should be like. And I try to mirror that image of what I think that person should be. And I look out in the world for examples of what I like and what I don't like in people, and I try to be the opposite of those things I don't like, and I try to, of course, become those things that I do like. And I call that, eventually I call that the self. That eventually becomes myself. That is the identity that I've chosen for myself. I know it sounds circular, but that's kind of, Reggie, that is how I
know what you're talking
arrived
about,
at that. Mm-hmm.
And I completely agree with what you're saying, in that people construct their own identities. Your identity is not something that you're given. Obviously, there are certain physical features that you have and I have that we're given in some sense. But how we define our identity, who we think we are, is something that results from a process of mental construction.
Right.
According to Buddhism, this process of mental construction is a very bad thing. Now, first of all, when we construct ourselves in accordance with what we think we are like or what we think we should be like, a lot of delusion can creep in. More than 90% of all college professors think they are better than average teachers.
Okay.
And in general, if you ask people questions like, compared to other people, are you smarter than average or dumber than average? A large majorities tend to say they're smarter than average, which can't possibly be true. But that's not the main thing that's wrong with the process of construction of identity. If there was just a little harmless self-delusion, it would be okay. When people construct their identity as part of a group, suppose I were to say, I am a Serb. Well, when you construct your identity as part of a group, you define people who are not part of that group as other. And that can lead to a tremendous amount of problems. It can lead to hatred and xenophobia.
Of course.
So there's something very dangerous about this process of constructing an identity. So what the Buddhist tradition tries to do is show you that, in fact, there is no real self which objectively exists. Your sense of yourself is something that you have constructed. And so what the Buddhist tradition says is, stop doing that. Stop constructing a self, and you'll be happier.
But, why? I don't understand. Why? I still don't get. Okay, well, yeah, sure, there are negative aspects, but also, could there be many positive aspects as well? Kind of like what I mentioned before. The way I construct myself is not dangerous, I wouldn't think.
Well, I hope that that's true, Reggie, and I'm confident that that's true. But just think about this. You're going to die. This is inevitable.
Right.
Everybody dies. And most people manage to hide, most of the time, that fact from themselves. But so long as you think of yourself as an individual person, so long as you have this conception that you have constructed of yourself as an objectively existing individual, so long as that is the case, you're going to have a fear of death, which is, of course, a major source of misery and also of various wrongful actions.
That's weird how it comes to different, but yes, I can see how that would be the case for others. And we get a caller here. We'll let him stand by here for a second. But yeah, like I don't fear death myself. I simply fear the way I die, the way I might die. I'm worried about pain and all those things. Death itself, I'm not afraid of. I believe maybe Alonzo or someone else in chat can correct me here. I don't know if it was Epicurus or not who said, why should I fear something that does not exist when I do? So that's kind of my approach. I've never really been afraid of death, just dying.
Good for you.
Yes. Well, if you don't mind, luckily we still have plenty of time. We've covered a lot already. Let's take a call here if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for holding. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, Reggie. It's Daniel DeCastro speaking. How are you?
Oh, how you doing? I'm doing great.
Pretty good. How you been?
All right. Haven't heard you in a long while.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I've been around. I've been, busy with work and school.
Oh, that was a shock. I was like, wow. Okay, okay. What's going on?
It's pretty interesting because I've been posting on the boards regarding my own idea about what happens when you die, and this is pretty much closely related to what I believe to be the case when you die.
Okay.
Basically, I believe that we're all like atomic structures, and this doesn't fall into the realm of reductionism because we can be broken down to component parts, namely atomic particles, as opposed to other materials that exist that cannot be broken down in such a way.
Okay.
So, those rules apply to us, and
right.
We can be broken down in such a manner. And basically what I believe Charles Goodman is trying to say is that, we should not believe in the doctrine of no self because basically, we could be made up of many different selves at the same time. And with my idea, pretty much the whole concept of the self doesn't exist either. I mean, we're pretty much, made up of...
You mean in any objective way, but you would always, of course, in colloquial conversation, you would refer to yourself as a self.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so which means it must exist at least at that point in which you're talking about it.
Yeah, and he was going into something about appreciating or, I guess, like being altruistic and stuff because, in a sense, we are all... I don't know. I mean, I think to me it's missing something to say that without, bringing it all together like I do. I say, hey, you know what? We're all part of the same world.
Exactly.
And I believe
that's what I look at it. That's how I look at it. Right, from biology.
Right,
biology,
exactly.
Chemistry. Just knowing what I am, how I am, my kinship to all things on this world. I think makes me a more passionate person. For me. Unsure if this self thing for me doesn't seem to be an issue for me, but maybe I can see it as an issue for other people. But it seems like there are a lot more factors that go into the way these individuals who view these self, and the reasons why they harm people. But I think there's other factors as well. I think we'll look at, but I think that's probably beyond the scope of maybe what Charles is talking about. I guess.
Reggie, can I talk a little bit about this idea of being connected with the rest of the world?
Yeah, sure. 1 second. All right. Well, Daniel, you just want to share that with us? You're done?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Hey, take care.
You too. Bye. All right, Alonzo, I'm sorry, 888-503-0802. Hey, Alonzo Fife, it looks like you have a lot to say here in the IRC chat room. Feel free to go ahead and give us a call here. If you need a number again, just go ahead and somebody will post it there for you. Give us a call, please, and I'll put you on hold here, and we'll bring you on the air. All right, Charles.
Well, Reggie, suppose that somebody were to look at the boundary between you and the clothes you're wearing now with an extremely powerful instrument, maybe more powerful than any, say, microscope that we presently have, that can see down to the molecular or atomic level. Now, what they would see is not a sharp boundary that divides you from the rest of the world, but something much more fuzzy. Your body is constantly exchanging matter with the rest of the world. Whenever you breathe in and out or take a drink or eat or go to the bathroom, matter flows in and out of your body. Obviously, it follows that for much of this matter, there's no true answer to the question of whether it is part of you or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to imagine, isn't it? So you have fuzzy boundaries instead of precise boundaries. Now, what is that telling us? Whenever something has fuzzy boundaries, you have the potential for paradoxes. This idea of vagueness seems to be one that cannot easily be accommodated if we think that the thing that we're acknowledging is vague really and objectively exists. Let's take a very simple case. Reggie, imagine that there was a guy with no hairs at all in his head. Would you call him bald?
Yeah.
Suppose he got one hair. If somebody who was bald acquired one more hair than he had before, would you ever say that he had become not bald by getting that one additional hair?
Wow. That's a fuzzy area again there. I mean, if I were being technical, if I was forced to be technical, I would just, I would say, I don't know what the heck I'd say. He's balding again. He's more bald, less balding. I don't know.
Well, but I certainly think that if somebody walked into your studio with, completely gleaming head and just one little hair poking up,
I'd say he's bald.
People would say he was bald.
Yep, no doubt.
And if that fellow got one additional hair,
I still say he's bald.
You'd still say he's bald.
Yes.
So when a bald person gets one more hair, that person stays bald. Well, Reggie, I think it follows that
yes.
It follows that you and I are bald. Because no matter how many hairs you and I have, you could get from 0 hairs to that many hairs by adding one in a series of successive steps.
Well, I mean, if we took that to its kind of, to me, it seems like a ridiculous conclusion, yes, but we obviously don't do that, though, in the real world. I mean, right.
So, if we tried to treat the concept of bald as if it were completely precise scientific concept, it would break down because we would get this paradox. But normally we use these words in a much looser and more fuzzy type of way. Okay. But nevertheless, whenever you have vagueness, you have the potential for paradoxes. Now consider the vagueness at the beginning and end of a person's life.
Okay.
Reggie, if you were Christian and you believed in a soul, then you might think that God infuses the soul into the zygote at the very moment of conception.
Okay.
I'm betting you don't believe that, do you?
No.
Okay. So then, on your view, a single fertilized egg, is that a person?
No.
No. Okay. Suppose that something isn't a person and it grows one more cell. Could it become a person by doing that?
I wouldn't think so. No.
You wouldn't think so.
No.
But you see, Reggie, that it follows that neither you nor I are persons? Because both of us arose from a single-celled fertilized egg.
Oh, no way.
By adding one cell at a time.
Of course, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the reason why we think we're persons is because we interact with other individuals. We have memories. Earlier we talked about this self thing about how we create ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would factor into all those other aspects as well. I wouldn't just look at just one single thing. And
Reggie, of course, we're people conventionally. I agree with that. But think, we gradually grew from a fertilized egg, which is not a person, into what we are now. Is there a sharp dividing line where you can say, this minute the thing is not a person, and the next minute it is? As the fetus grows.
Some might argue that, but I'm still not certain on that myself.
It certainly seems like it would be very hard to say. If somebody said at 6 months, 2 weeks, 5 days, 4 hours, and 3 seconds.
And because it varies from individual to individual.
But I don't just think it's because it varies from individual to individual. I would say that as the fetus grows, there is no particular moment at which it becomes a person. The beginning of a person's life is vague. And this vagueness calls into question whether people really objectively exist. If we look at the boundaries of our concept of person very carefully,
but it's a sliding scale. But Charles, it's a sliding scale, so to speak. Or it can go either way, I should say, right? I mean, it could go, okay, we can't tell whether or not this person is or is not a person. It can go, right?
Sure.
Either way.
Okay, so it could be that in some cases there's a fetus that's growing, and we could say we just don't know whether this fetus is a person or not. Right?
Right.
Okay. Let's try on something else, Reggie. imagine the following case. Suppose that there was a neurosurgeon who developed these nanorobots.
Okay.
And what these nanorobots were capable of doing was going into your brain and rearranging some of the connections between your neurons.
All right.
This might happen within the next 30 years, don't you think?
Yes. Well, I don't know about 30, but yes. Okay.
I said might.
Yeah, okay.
It's the connections between your neurons and how strong those connections are that define your personality, your beliefs, memories, values, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine that this neurosurgeon kidnaps you, Reggie.
Okay.
And takes you down to his lair, and then he sends the nanorobots into your brain, and they change 1%
Oh, here we go.
of your beliefs, values, desires, memories, and so on.
Oh, man.
Into the beliefs, values, memories, and desires of Napoleon.
Mm.
So now you speak a few words of French. You're a little bit better at strategy than you were before.
Oh, I hate that.
Would this 1% change make you a different person, or would you still be Reggie?
I'd be a different person.
Even if only 1% of
even if I think we kind of agreed on along your lines earlier, but yes, I mean if I just learn one new word, I mean I've now acquired something new. I've built something. I've added something to myself. I
see. Okay.
Yes.
Well, how about we run through the argument, because it won't take much long to complete it, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be convinced that you aren't the same from moment to moment, because that's quite a striking thing to be convinced of, don't you think? That you did not exist 5 minutes ago? That there is no single one person that has listened to or participated in creating this radio show, but that we're all constantly changing our personal identity every moment? That's quite a thing to believe.
I see. Right. And I think that's why we kind of agreed there as well. We don't exist from. And I guess that's where, again, the line gets kind of blurry as you're talking about. I can say, okay, no, I did not exist 5 minutes ago. I've acquired much more experience, with you. I've learned a few things. There's so many other things happening right now while we're doing this program. I'm a different person than I was 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
And, but again, it's still, okay. Okay, Charles, this is my issue. Remember before I said, well, yeah, but surely in this instance, when I contemplate what the self is,
yes,
I must refer to myself as an individual, so therefore the self at least does exist at that moment.
Well, now, Reggie, what is your self at this very moment? Describe it to me.
Oh, geez. That'll take forever.
Okay.
That'll take an entire show. I can't do it.
You might, for example, start by saying things like that you have two hands.
Oh, but then, here you go. I got you. I see. I'm catching on to you, Charles. I see what you're about. I see. In the process of me even trying to describe that, already time has passed. Different. Yes.
But that wasn't where I was. That would be a fine place to go. But that wasn't where I was going.
Oh, okay. All right.
Here's what I had in mind.
Okay.
So suppose you start describing yourself right now.
All right.
Or rather, suppose I start describing myself right now. I might say that I'm wearing a short-sleeved white shirt.
Okay.
Okay, with a black pattern.
Right.
Now, this morning I could have put on a different shirt.
Right.
If I had put on a different shirt, would it still be the same me standing here talking to you?
You know what? I see a weird valid. I remember reading about this. I'm not an expert on logic, but I know that you would be Charles Goodman in a different shirt. So technically, no, you're not the same person.
Well, but I think most people, though, would say that I would be the same person. Nevertheless, if you say I would be a different person,
most people would, yes.
Yeah, most people would say that. Okay. Well, suppose we run down other things that you might say about who you are at this very moment. The color of your hair, for example. Well, you might have dyed your hair this morning. Or say one of your beliefs. Well, you might have changed your mind about that belief this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that is something such that if it were different, then that would still be you.
Right.
Can't be something that defines who you really are right now, can it?
Well, no. I mean, again, someone would argue, and somebody else brought it up, and I was about to say it too. Someone would argue, well, you're talking about superficial, you're describing superficialness. Like hair and clothing and things like that. Some would say, well, that's how an individual. I mean, yeah, that's not really you. That's not how someone would recognize you. You could be naked and someone would still recognize you. So all those extra things, that really still isn't really you. You just tacked on these external objects onto your body.
Right. Okay, so, Reggie, now what we need to do is we need to try to figure out what it is that is really you at this very moment.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's think about it. Suppose that this morning you'd been subjected to one of those brain transplants, or as we agreed to call them, body transplants, from earlier in this show. Mm-hmm. But suppose that instead of having your brain transplanted into the body of a black man, your brain had been transplanted into the body of a young white woman.
Freaky.
And that happened this morning. And now this young white woman calls herself Reggie Finley, has all of your same beliefs, desires, memories, and so on, and is talking on the show right now. Would that be you, Reggie Finley?
I mean, it's weird because you want to separate this. You want to say, well, mentally, but I mean, if the person knows that this happened, I guess. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're making an analogy via the clothing with the external. Okay, I see what you're doing.
Yeah. So in other words, your whole body outside of your brain, from this point of view, just looks like clothing that you're wearing. From the perspective that it could have been different and you would still be you. I
mean, well, the individual would think that they're still them, but of course, I guess you should say your environment is going to reinforce that that's not the case. And you'd be changed simply because of what they say? I don't know.
Well, certainly. But the point is here that in this case, if it's the night before and you're still in your Reggie Finley body, you can anticipate that the next day you will wake up in this young white woman's body, and you'll look totally different. People will treat you differently. Right. But it'll still be you. That's probably what you would anticipate.
I would think that, right.
Okay. Of course, you wouldn't be right, because as we pointed out earlier, you don't have a self that endures over time. But let's focus on the fact.
But I have memories, though.
Sure. But let's focus on the fact that everything that is part of your physical appearance is outside of your brain. And so according to what we're saying now, the matter that composes your body outside of your brain is inessential to you. It's not part of who you really are at this very moment. Do you agree?
Right, yes.
Okay, now, suppose that this morning you had been teletransported.
Oh, boy.
Now you'd look just the same as the way you look now, but the matter in your brain would be different. Therefore, the matter that makes up your brain is not part of who you really are at this moment. Agreed?
Wait a minute. The matter has changed? Oh, I mean, what do you mean the matter has changed? I'm assuming...
It's different matter. If you're teletransported, then the replica is made out of different matter from the original.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, same, but just... I don't know.
Its form is the same. Its appearance is the same.
Okay, yeah. I mean, because I'm thinking, in order to make a perfect copy, you would think it would have to be at least the same. Okay, I got you. The same form, the same structure, but
matter.
Different kind of matter. No, it's not even kind of matter. It's just different matter from someplace else.
Yes, matter from someplace else.
Right, because it wouldn't be a different kind. No, I wouldn't.
It would be the same kind of matter, but it would be matter numerically different. When people talk about two identical billiard balls, philosophers say that two identical billiard balls are qualitatively the same because they look just alike. Right. But they're numerically distinct because there are two of them, not one.
Oh, okay.
Does that distinction make sense?
Yes, of course.
So the matter that you're going to be made of after you walk out of the teletransporter is numerically distinct, numerically different from the matter that you had before you walked in.
I follow you, right.
Good. Now, here's the point I'm trying to make. Given that you, Reggie, think that being teletransported is a way of surviving, so that the person who walks out of the teletransporter is you, at least that's what you said earlier in the program, it follows that the matter of which your brain is made is not part of who you really are right now, any more than the matter that your body is made out of. Okay. That leaves the way that the matter in your brain is arranged. In other words, the form of your brain, which encodes all of your beliefs, your desires, your memories, thoughts, and so on.
I think my brain is liquefying right now, by the way. But, okay.
Well, Reggie, this teaching is not easy. I actually have spent a great deal of my not very long professional life thinking carefully about this and developing arguments based on Western philosophy in support of the Buddhist doctrine of no self. But it was already recognized 2,400 years ago by the Buddha that if you try to understand the way in which you exist, if you look for what it is that is who you really are, you won't find anything. It's like an onion. Suppose that you open up a peach. There's the flesh of the peach, and in the middle of the peach there's a hard stone.
Right.
Somebody might think that an onion was like that, and they might start peeling back the layers of the onion to find the hard core, but they'd never find anything. When they peeled all the layers, there'd be nothing left. Agreed?
Right.
Okay. You're like that. If you start from everything that defines what you take to be yourself, and you start peeling away everything that is inessential, you start peeling away everything that isn't what defines who you really are, you'll end up with nothing. You'll have peeled away everything, and you won't have anything left to define your identity.
Right, but then, but again, the argument is why are we looking at the parts that way when the self is obviously a collection of the whole, at least in one particular instance?
Okay, so
as I keep arguing, once,
So Reggie, you say that the self is the collection of all the parts. Is that right?
Typically when we refer to ourselves, I'm pretty sure most people in general think that way. Yes, I mean everything they are, all their experiences, they think of all of that.
I agree with you that at least many people think that way. Now, Reggie, let me ask you a seemingly unrelated question.
Okay.
Suppose I had a pile of peanuts, 100 peanuts in the pile. And suppose I were to take away one peanut and replace it with a different peanut. Mm-hmm. Would I have the same pile or a different pile?
You'd have a different pile.
Okay. You say that, but not everybody says that. Some people say that you'd have the same pile. But certainly if you removed all the peanuts...
Qualitatively, I got you, versus quantitatively.
If you removed all the peanuts and replaced them with all new peanuts, you definitely have a new pile.
Right.
And after you replace maybe 55 or 60, it's pretty clear that the pile is different. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you have a collection of peanuts, if you replace even one peanut, you call into question the identity of the collection. If you replace many peanuts...
All right, you got me. I'm trying to get around this, but I can't.
Right. So you can't say that the self is the collection of all its parts because the parts are constantly
always changing. You're right. Cells are dying left and right all the time. Interesting.
Yes.
But it makes some may argue that then are we talking about two different kinds of selves or something? I don't know. Maybe you heard a rebuttal. Maybe there's some type of division here. I'm still trying to work it out. We'll say, we got a caller. Maybe he can help us out. Yeah, all right. Let's take this call. Thank you for holding. Appreciate it. I think this might be Laz here. Hello.
That's right. It's me.
How you doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Oh man, like I said, my brain is liquefying right now, but I love it. It's fun.
Yeah. How's Charles doing?
Great. He's doing great. I think I kind of predicted. I thought I was predicting a lot of what he was going to say, and then it turns around and bites me in the butt later. But it's fun.
Well, I just had a few basic questions.
Sure.
The first thing is Charles, I think earlier in the program you agreed with Reggie. You said specifically that you agree with him that we exist conventionally. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Could you give a more precise definition or account of what you mean by existing conventionally?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the trouble with that is that different Buddhist schools define conventional existence differently. I've been trying to conduct this discussion at a level of generality which allows me to fudge the distinctions between different forms of Buddhism. But let me use the account which is defended in the Middle Way School, which all Tibetan Buddhists belong to, and which is the school that I take the most seriously.
This is the school that was thought up by Nagarjuna.
Exactly, the Madhyamaka, or Middle Way School.
Right.
Now, in the Middle Way School, conventional existence means that something lacks objective, intrinsic, ultimate existence. So, if you look at the different things in the world and you ask, does this thing exist objectively? Or does it exist in a way which has been somehow conceptually constructed? That is, it exists within a certain perspective, from a certain point of view. Okay? You find that it's the perspective-dependent relational existence that things have, And they don't actually have any objective, independent, absolute existence. So, it's not just the self of an individual person that crumbles and disappears under analysis. Suppose we had a rock. You might think that a rock is a perfect example of something which exists objectively. Nobody had to make up this rock, you might say. This rock clearly exists in and of itself from its own side, independently of us. But then, just start asking questions like, if somebody comes and breaks the rock in half, will it still exist? And if so, which half will it be? And you'll find that you aren't able to specify conditions under which the rock will continue to exist. In other words, you can't find the essence of the rock. The fact that there is no way for you to identify the essence of the rock means, according to the Middle Way School, that the rock exists only from a certain point of view. If you drop all points of view, then you're in a state in which you see the world the way it really is, but you don't see any objects. That's a state in which you're aware but are not aware of any objects. Part of the path to enlightenment is to attain a stage like that.
Okay, so let's try to apply that to something else that you said just before.
Okay.
You said to Reggie, you're going to die someday.
Yes.
Okay, now, when you said you to Reggie, what precisely, in positive terms, were you referring to?
Okay.
That's what I was wondering, too, actually.
Yes. I was speaking at the level of conventional truth. At the level of ultimate truth, there's nothing you can say. As the great Buddhist philosopher Chandrakirti said, ultimate truth is a matter for silence. So if you ask me at the ultimate level whether Reggie is going to die, I'm going to tell you that concepts like death and time and individual identity don't apply at the ultimate level because they can all be refuted by the arguments of the Middle Way School. However, if you're asking me at the conventional level, then obviously you and I and everybody here is going to die. So somebody who has attained enlightenment sees that at the conventional level, he or she is still going to die. But they don't take that fact very seriously because they also see that at the ultimate level, all such claims don't hold up. So they don't take their own death seriously, and so it doesn't bother them, and they're not afraid of it.
So to me, so far to me, it sounds like you're saying, so the self does exist, as you said, if you look at it this way. So from a conventional and qualitative standpoint, the self does exist, but you're saying we don't need to look at it from that perspective. That's really what you're saying, right?
Well, what I'm saying is something a little bit stronger than that. I'm saying you might think that this perspective is showing you the way things really are. You might think that this perspective is disclosing to you things which exist in and of themselves independently of that perspective, but that's not the case. The analogy that's often used is the analogy of a mirage.
Mm-hmm.
A mirage is not something which is completely non-existent. It's not a myth that there are mirages. In fact, mirages do exist. But they don't exist in the way that they appear to exist. Their existence is deceptive because they appear to be water, but really they're just a phenomenon caused by light bouncing off layers of heated air.
They won't say, or you can say they don't exist independently of an observer.
Exactly.
Right.
They have a kind of observer-dependent, relational, deceptive existence. Similarly, you, Reggie, and you, Laz, you have an observer-dependent, relational, deceptive existence in that you seem to yourself to exist really and truly and ultimately, but you don't. And the same is true of me.
Damn, Laz.
Okay, well, one last thing, and
Sure.
I've liked actually everything that you've said so far, but I'll ask you one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you, let's take again the statement, Reggie, you're going to die someday.
Yes.
And you said that around 10 minutes ago. Now, the you that you're referring to in the conventional sense, now, are you saying that the you that you were referring to 10 minutes ago is no longer the you? It's not present anymore?
Reggie was saying something like that, but that's not what I'm saying.
Okay. So
conventional truth is defined by some late Indian Buddhists as that which satisfies without analysis. So here's how it works. Suppose I don't analyze the way in which I exist, and I just ask the question at the conventional level, who has been talking to Reggie for the past 50 minutes? The answer, of course, is me, Charles Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
But then suppose that I try to analyze the way in which Charles Goodman exists. I won't find any defensible way of explaining the way in which I exist. It's not going to be possible to give any coherent philosophical account of the nature of my existence. What that's telling me is that really, from an ultimate point of view, I don't exist. So, if you just ask conventionally, of course I said that stuff. And it's not true either at the conventional level or at the ultimate level that there are two different people, one now and one back then. That's just a stage in the argument that establishes the ultimate non-existence of the self. Instead, at the conventional level, I exist, and the ultimate truth is a matter for silence.
Okay. This is going to bring me into some more complicated questions, and I don't want to quite do that on the air because Reggie's mind probably liquefied 100% already.
Well, we only have 7 minutes left, but I guess if we need to, I guess I think Charles has a little time. We can take it into Stickcam just for those who want to continue the discussion. But, ladies and gentlemen, I must remind you, though, Rational Response Squad is next at 8 p.m., so if you're a fan of that show, make sure you listen to that. You can always catch this on a podcast later. Okay, go ahead, Laz. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, well, Charles
sorry.
said that your claim before about there being two different people of sorts is a stage in the argument that ultimately concludes in the view that there is no self. Mm-hmm. Now, that has me a little bit confused because if that view has to be adopted in any sense during the stage of the argument, then I'm still seeing problems. Charles, you say that you don't exactly want to hold to that view, but don't you hold to that view some point if you're saying that it is something that is used as a stage in the argument?
This is a very interesting question because it gets at something which people who read Buddhist texts can often find very strange. So, for example, I am working on translating a particular Buddhist text called the Compendium of Theories About Reality, the Tattvasangraha. And the guy who wrote the book, Shanta Rakshita, was in fact a member of the Middle Way School. He advocated the view that I was briefly sketching for you a minute ago. But a lot of the time, he talks as if he is an idealist. That is, he talks as if he thinks that only mind is real and matter is not real. Mm-hmm. But according to most interpreters, he's actually using that position only as an intermediate stage. So here's how he gets you. First, he argues to you that mind is real and matter is not real, but that's not, in fact, what he believes. Then he's going to show you that mind is also not ultimately real and arrive at the view of the Middle Way School, that nothing is ultimately real. Everything has merely conventional existence. There are many other examples in the Buddhist tradition of philosophers who, in order to get to where they're ultimately trying to get to, which is often something very strange and counterintuitive, start by arguing for something which seems a little bit weird but not hopeless. Then they get you to that position. Then they argue for something stronger and more difficult to believe. But by now you've made so many concessions that you can't resist going along with it.
Right.
And ultimately they lead you to where they finally want to go. So the Buddhist philosopher, the attitude that the Buddhist philosopher is going to take toward these intermediate positions is that these are views which have been purified of some of the defects of ordinary awareness, but they still have other defects. And so you can take them on temporarily as tools in argument, but you don't actually believe them.
Wow, okay. And I guess my last question before I get off the air is, tonight you're defending the thesis that there is no real objectively existing self.
Precisely.
Do you believe that this also applies for all objects as well?
Yes.
Yes, you kind of hit on that earlier. Yes, right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you believe that all objects and all persons are ultimately empty.
That's right.
So the universe doesn't exist. I'm just kidding.
Well, it doesn't exist ultimately. That is, it turns out in the Middle Way School that conventional existence is the only way that anything can exist. There's no such thing as a thing which is objectively and ultimately real. Everything, when you analyze it, turns out to be empty of any substantial self. That sounds like a very strange view.
Yes.
in fact, Buddhist texts are quite clear on this. That view is scary. So there are a number of texts which say that if you even start to entertain the possibility that this view, it's called emptiness, might be true, that you'll find it very, very frightening. It's also very difficult to get right. It's extremely easy to misinterpret this teaching of emptiness in ways that are going to be harmful to you. So what I would like to encourage you, Reggie, and you, Les, and all of the people listening to do is if you find these arguments that I've been presenting interesting, you might want to read a little bit of Buddhist philosophy. The fact is that Buddhist philosophy is very intriguing, highly rational, and contains a lot of arguments that you won't necessarily find in Western philosophy. Moreover, it has the kind of rationality, at least in some passages, that is tremendously appealing, I think, to people like you guys. Let me finish by telling an anecdote. Shantarakshita, the author of that book I was mentioning, went to Tibet. And the king of Tibet asked him, "What is your religion?" He said, "My religion is to believe whatever is in accord with reason and reject whatever is contrary to reason." I think that that's a pretty good kind of religion to have. And I claim that you can actually create a form of Buddhism that fully respects that credo that Shantarakshita offered. And that's a big part of what I'm doing with my life, and I hope some of your listeners will find that interesting.
You know, and again, I don't know if you have a little more time, Charles, but we have a ton of questions from the chat room, and I would really feel guilty if I left the chatters, hanging and not getting an opportunity to ask their questions and challenges to you. Can you stay with us for another 30 minutes, possibly?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll do that. Okay, right now, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we have actually 1 minute until the top of the hour, and Rational Response Squad is going to be airing soon. So again, if you're a fan of that show, stay tuned. If you want to listen to the responses to your questions in the IRC chat room, feel free to go ahead and switch on over to the stick cam room, and we'll allow Charles to address those. Also, you can still call in as well, toll free, 888-503-0802. Well, all right. Laz, you going to hang on with us, or you want to?
Sure, I'll hang on with you.
Okay, cool. All right. All right, so stand by. We're going to go switch over here. Again, get ready for the Rational Response Squad coming up next. I'll let Sapient take care of that. Here we go. All right, just disconnected from the live Shoutcast stream, and now we're moving over into the stick cam room. All right, so here we are. Now, okay. Now, I got a lot of questions here. Sorry, Laz, were you done with your list of questions, or did you have something else as well?
Well, I did have a couple more things, and I think that Charles actually might appreciate a couple of these questions. Okay.
Well, tell you what. Let's hold off on that for a second. Let's go ahead and take care of these other guys who've been waiting as well. You have someone who asks, I think it's No Gods in the chat room, says, if the self does not exist, why would one... Oh, it's all messed up. Oh, there it is. Oh, darn it, I lost it. My logs dropped it. But anyway, basically she was arguing that if the self does not exist, then why would that... Like, you mentioned that it would make you more... I don't know, was it giving and altruistic and all these various things? Yes. He says, well, but if they don't exist either, why would you?
Yes, that's a very good question.
Okay.
I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to start off by quoting Shantideva, who is a wonderful Buddhist philosopher, who wrote a book called the Bodhicharyavatara, the Introduction to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. You can get that. It's been translated by a number of different authors, such as Crosby and Skilton. It's a very, very good book to read. I highly recommend it. Okay, Shantideva says, without exception, no sufferings belong to anyone. They are to be warded off simply because they are suffering. Why is any limitation put on this? Mm-hmm. Now, that's a very difficult verse, so let me explain it a little.
Yes.
The idea is, there isn't really any self, but there's suffering in the world. So, it makes sense to relieve this suffering And it makes sense to relieve this suffering in a way that pays no attention.
No way. I'm sorry, Charles. I'm sorry, I should let you finish, but right away, I'm sitting here thinking, what? Wait a minute, but how is there really suffering in the world if the suffering isn't really happening to these individuals? I mean, it's not really happening at all because they're different 1 second to the next, or one molecule to the next. They're not the same person, so does suffering even really exist? I mean, you could be challenged, obviously, with that. Does suffering even really exist?
Yes, that's a good question. Shantideva is pulling a fast one, and it's interesting that you caught it. He's really looking at things from a couple of different perspectives. But let's put it this way. Even though suffering only exists conventionally, nevertheless, it hurts. If you get rid of your attachment to the idea that there are distinct individual selves, then you get rid of your instinctive tendencies to identify yourself as important and others as less important. Now, according to the Buddhist tradition, and this particular claim is something that I don't have, as it were, a rational argument for. This has to be based on religious experience. According to the Buddhist tradition, if you remove all of your innate afflictions, if you get rid of all of your greed, hatred, and delusion, then what's going to come out, what's going to shine forth as your original nature is compassion. And that compassion is a compassion which extends to all sentient beings throughout space. So, again, I can't prove to you that that's the way things are, nor can I explain why things are that way. But according to the Buddhist tradition, that is the way things are. And so getting rid of attachment to the idea of sentient beings is going to allow that compassion to shine forth.
Yeah, and again, and obviously, you said a mouthful there, Charles, but I really don't think that actually solved the dilemma, obviously. You say he was trying to pull a fast one, but yet you were using it earlier. Again, do you agree, though, that suffering assumes the self then, right?
No, I don't agree with that. There is another form of Buddhism, Buddhist reductionism, which is associated with the Theravada school, which presently exists, and with various forms of Buddhism that don't presently exist, such as the Vipashikas and the Sautrantikas. Within the perspective of Buddhist reductionism, mental states exist, but people do not exist. Now, that view, I think, is not the highest form of Buddhism, but it's a very interesting view to consider.
Oh, my gosh. And even that could be challenged, because mental states could change, too.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
The way that these guys think of mental states is that they exist for exactly one moment.
Why can't the self exist for one moment?
Well, because of the argument that I was presenting earlier.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll just let you finish. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, your turn. This is actually a very difficult point to explain. If you get rid of the ultimate object of existence of everything, that is, if you go with the Madhyamaka dialectic and you eliminate the ultimate existence of everything in the world, and you're left with just conventional existence, then it's not clear why it should be the case that compassion is rationally required. From the point of view of Buddhist reductionism, which is the point of view that Shantideva is actually assuming in that verse that I quoted for you, from that point of view, it makes sense to advocate universal compassion, because then you're concerned about mental states like happiness and suffering, and you're not concerned about where they exist or who they happen to. But from a Madhyamaka point of view, there has to be compassion which somehow emerges from emptiness. Buddhists who have had experiences of emptiness claim that having experiences of emptiness makes people compassionate. And in fact, if you hang out with people who claim to have had experiences of emptiness, they tend to be very kind, compassionate people. So I claim that there's some kind of empirical evidence that this is true, but I don't have a philosophical argument or a philosophical explanation of why it would be true that emptiness would make you compassionate.
Right. You mentioned something that sparked a lot of interest in this Dick Ham rumor. You mentioned, maybe it's not an important point, but you mentioned a moment. Mm-hmm. What the heck is a moment?
Yes, that's a very good question. You could think of a moment as a geometrical point of time. But that's not the way that the historical Buddhist tradition thinks of it. They think of it as a very, very, very small but finite amount of time. It's as if time is quantized. So in certain physical theories, not necessarily the physical theories that are true, but theories that physicists have developed in their attempts to explain the world over the course of the 20th century, they hypothesize that maybe there is a smallest unit of space, so that there's such a thing as the shortest distance that something can possibly move, as if all of space were like a kind of n-dimensional chessboard. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So,
no.
So this idea that space is quantized is one that we can give mathematical formulation to. Similarly, we might argue that time is quantized, that there's such a thing as the smallest unit of time in which anything can happen. And that's what the Buddhist tradition in India, at least some forms of the Buddhist tradition in India, thought was true. Some Indian Buddhists believe that there is such a thing as the shortest unit of time.
Okay.
And they called that a kshana, or moment.
Right. Or in physics, some people are saying it's Planck time you're talking about, right? Or something, what?
Yes, something like that.
Something like that. Something like that. Okay. All right. And again, I'm trying to figure out, okay, then why couldn't this self exist at these particular types of time as well? Even though, I mean, you see, it doesn't really work for you. So I'm saying your argument necessarily. It just doesn't. Sure, you can say, well, yeah, but like I said before, you're always changing, whatever. I don't know, but I mean, it doesn't seem like it really works for your argument actually if they are going to allow these moments to exist. It seems absolutely that they objectively that these moments exist. Then right. If they do, then the self could exist within that moment as well. Even
so what we're getting into now is the complexity of the Buddhist tradition. I teach a course at Binghamton University called Buddhist Metaphysics, which goes over about 42 hours. And
jeez.
Well, you know, it's broken up, and it's not 42
I know.
hours. It takes a whole semester. But in this course, I cover the various different forms of Buddhist philosophy in India and Tibet. And even then, there's vast amounts of material that I don't have time for. But what's going on is that you have several different perspectives which are not necessarily compatible. On the one hand, you have the view of Buddhist reductionism, according to which there are these moments and there are mental states that really exist but no selves, no people. Also, according to Buddhist reductionism, there are things like atoms. There are tiny momentary material particles that really exist. Mm-hmm. That's one view within the Buddhist tradition. Then you have the view of idealism, which also occurs in the Buddhist tradition in figures such as Dharmakirti and Asanga. And then you have the middle way school, which, as Laz helpfully told us earlier, was founded by Nagarjuna, according to which everything is empty. And when we were broadcasting on the air, I was defending the middle way school view. But, of course, there are these other Buddhist positions as well, and they're not compatible with each other. They're different philosophies, which are generated as attempts to understand, explain, defend different parts of the Buddhist tradition.
Mm-hmm. All right, Laz, where are you so far in this? You got anything to say, or you've been kind of quiet?
I like everything that he has to say so far. But I had a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead and ask your questions, then I'll kick you off the line. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, Charles, I'm thinking of this right now, really, and I don't know whether or not you agree with this idea, and I don't know whether or not I really agree with this idea. But would you say that propositions will always refer to objects or relations when they're expressed?
Okay. Les, I don't think that propositions are the kind of things which exist ultimately. Now, there are some philosophers who believe that there really are such things as propositions. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, propositions are funny entities because they're abstract entities. I mean, you can't see them or touch them or smell them or kick them or spill your coffee on them. So you got to ask, if there really are such things as propositions, if these are the kinds of things that ultimately exist, then how do we know anything about them? Since, after all, we can't gather any empirical evidence about them since they're abstract entities. So before I answer your question about propositions, which would certainly get me into hot water if I answered it in the affirmative, I want to know, how do you know that there really are such things as propositions?
Well, okay. You you were just talking just now about the ontology of propositions. Well, okay. I don't necessarily see that there is or has to be any ontology of propositions. We can now. Would you have a problem with saying that propositions? Okay, fine. Propositions are simply the meaning component of a sentence.
Okay.
Fine. Now, do sentences, exist as a thing out there? No, I think that's reification. But can we just take all these ideas, propositions, sentences, and things like that, and simply talk about them for the moment rather, in the conventional sense?
Absolutely. So, from a conventional point of view, we have language, and now you're asking me a question about reference. You're asking me, does language refer to objects and relations? Is that the question?
Well, the question is more precisely, do propositions always refer to objects and their relations?
Okay. Well, right. Because, of course, you have things in language like, what's 2 plus 2?
Mm-hmm.
And now it might be very tricky to figure out whether a sentence like 2 plus 2 is 4, which might seem to express a proposition, will or will not refer to objects and relations between them. I mean, is the number 2 an object?
No. Well, go ahead.
We have expressions in language where you might be tempted to think that they refer to objects, but it seems like they really don't. Consider, for example, the word sake. I might say, I drove to the grocery store for my wife's sake. But then somebody might say, well, wait a minute, what about this sake? How much does it weigh? What does it look like, my wife's sake? And obviously only somebody who is very strange would ask that question, because everybody knows that there aren't really any such things as sakes, but we kind of talk as if they were.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so not everything in language that necessarily appears to refer to an object really does. However, it's certainly the case that sometimes sentences that we utter manage to refer to conventionally existing objects. I would be prepared to accept that.
Okay. All right, so let's go with that. That's absolutely fine. Now, the proposition, everything is empty, does that refer to, that actually refers to objects, correct? It's referring to everything, and we're talking in the conventional sense.
Yeah. So, for example, if I say tables are empty, then I'm referring to tables, and I'm ascribing to them the property of being empty.
Okay. So everything within that proposition, then, everything, that's the actual thing that we're talking about, everything. So everything in that proposition is empty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I'm drawing from this then, and I know this is rather complex, but your proposition that everything is empty is itself empty.
That's correct.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's the kind of conclusion I had to draw from that, yes.
There is a whole book called The Replies to Objections, the Vigraha Vyavartani of Nagarjuna, which is directed at precisely this issue. Just exactly the issue, Les, that you're bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
The opponent says, wait a minute. You claim that everything is empty, but your thesis that everything is empty is itself empty according to you. And moreover, your reasons for your thesis would have to be empty as well. Therefore, your view is refuted. And what Nagarjuna says is, no, actually, my thesis is empty, and my reasons for it are empty, but emptiness is not the same as complete non-existence. Mm-hmm. Emptiness allows for conventional existence. My thesis and the reasons for it exist conventionally, so there is no problem.
Okay. All right, that's extremely interesting.
Yes, and if you want more details, that work, the Vigraha Vyavartani, has been translated into English several times. There's a book called The Dialectical Method of Nagarjuna. Mm-hmm. There's another book called Nagarjunian Disputations. Both of those books contain translations of the text, which you can read.
I have one of your students I know personally. he's got a copy of the I can't say it the correct way, so don't hold it against me when I butcher the word, with the Mula Madhya Mada Karika, whatever.
Yeah. The fundamental verses on the Middle Way School, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, right?
Okay.
That's the most important philosophical work by Nagarjuna. There's
Right.
a recent translation of it by J. Garfield that's worth reading.
Yes, that's actually the copy that he has. Does that book talk about the emptiness of emptiness?
That book never uses the phrase, the emptiness of emptiness. The phrase, the emptiness of emptiness, is due to Chandrakirti. So perhaps I should say a little bit about the history here. Nagarjuna is very difficult to date. He probably lives somewhere between the 1st, 2nd century CE. He's a very important figure in Buddhist philosophy, perhaps the most important Buddhist philosopher after the Buddha. Chandrakirti lived much later, approximately 500 years later, and he wrote several works, including the Clear Words, which is a commentary on the fundamental verses of the Middle Way School, and another book called The Introduction to the Middle Way School. If you go and you look for a title called The Emptiness of Emptiness, translated by Huntington, that's a translation mainly with a long, very valuable introduction of the Introduction to the Middle Way School. Anyway, so Chandrakirti is the one who introduces the phrase, the emptiness of emptiness. However, already in Nagarjuna, that idea is present. The idea of the emptiness of emptiness is that there is not some special thing called emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that there is some real, ultimately existing objective thing called emptiness. No, it's not like that at all. Chapter 24, verse 18 of the Fundamental Verses on the Middle Way School reads, "That which is dependent arising, that is explained to be emptiness. This, being a dependent designation, is itself the middle way." Now, that's quite a difficult verse to unpack. I would be happy to take an hour to unpack that verse. The main point with the verse is this. It's saying that emptiness is itself a dependent designation. That is,
right.
the phrase exists within language and within a context in which it exists relationally, and not objectively and ultimately. There is a debate in Tibet, and this debate had a very significant influence over the religious history of Tibet, between people who uphold the emptiness of emptiness, for example, the Gelug tradition to which the Dalai Lama belongs, and others, a small minority, who have historically upheld another view called Zhentong, or other emptiness, according to which there is something like an absolute, and it is empty of everything that is distinct from it, and it is special, real, and ultimate. So the mainstream of the Tibetan tradition holds this doctrine of the emptiness of emptiness, which comes ultimately from Chandrakirti. But there are some in Tibet who disagree with it.
Okay, I'm efficiently lost. At last, let me go. I need to go back and get some more questions from the chat room. I really appreciate you guys' exchange. That was quite interesting and actually quite humorous at times as well. I think that was mostly the fault of the stick cameras here.
Okay.
All right, Laz, thanks.
Thank you much.
All right, bye. Okay. Wow. Okay, Charles, I think you might have hit on this already. I'm not sure, but No Gods has a question for you again from the IRC room. He's asking, in what way, I guess, does space exist then, according to your philosophy? How does space exist? I don't know if that...
Right. That is another very, very good question. So I hope I'll handle this one better than the last question from the same reader.
Okay.
Listener. Okay. You might think that space is a real, ultimately existing entity. And some reasons for thinking that would be, first, it doesn't change. Second, it seems to be very important for all sorts of purposes. So it appears to be permanent. Okay. Now, I have to admit that I think that the issue of the nature of space is a very profound one, and I don't necessarily have a fully satisfactory solution to it. According to the philosophy that I advocate, there can't be anything ultimately existing and non-empty. So there are really two and only two routes that you can take with respect to space.
Okay.
One route you can take is the relationist route. And if you know anything about the Newton-Leibniz debate, this is the position that Leibniz defended. Leibniz said, there isn't really any such thing as space. There's just spatial relations between particular entities. So instead of thinking that there is a real single thing called space, we should instead say that some things are to the left of other things, and some things are higher than other things, and some things are a million miles away from some other things. And we can, if we really want to, talk about the collection of all those relations as space, but that doesn't mean that there's one single special entity, there's just a bunch of relations. And then these relations themselves obviously are going to be constantly changing empty things. The other possibility is to point out that according to general relativity, space itself can change because matter bends space. And in fact, space can expand. Now, I do know some things about physics, but less than I would need to explain to you in technical detail what that actually means.
Okay.
But
I'm a little confused, though. I'm sorry. You probably lost me. A minute ago, you said space didn't change. Now you're saying it does?
Okay. Normally, we think of space as not changing. Okay?
Okay.
And that might make us think that it is ultimately and objectively existing and non-empty. Okay? But according to general relativity, we're wrong. General relativity gives us a changing space, which can bend due to the presence of matter, which can expand and contract. So I'm saying that if you want to argue that there is no real ultimately existing thing called space, which I have to do given my philosophy, you have two options. The relationist option, where you deny that there is any such thing as space but accept spatial relations. And another view where you emphasize the fact that according to general relativity, space can change, and then you argue that space is a conventionally existing empty thing.
I'm okay. Oh, okay.
Again, Reggie, I'm dealing with these questions by bringing up a lot of very difficult philosophy very fast. So I apologize if things are less clear than they could be.
I'm curious about your take then on axioms. Mm-hmm. Do axioms exist in your mind?
Okay. There is such a thing as what it is for somebody to take something as an axiom. Mm-hmm. But, okay, if axioms were to exist, they would have to be abstract entities. Okay, let's back up a step. Reggie, what do you think about the number 2? Is there really such a thing as the number 2?
You know, we were debating that the other day, actually, in this thick cam room, and I know that there are like two major camps on this issue, and I'm still not certain, but it sure seems like it to me. I mean, the number 2 physically as a representation, no, but it sure does seem like you have two quantities that could influence something like it. To me, it seems like that is the case. To me, it seems like it, but I know some disagree, but
there aren't just 2 camps. There are actually 3 camps.
3 camps, okay.
At least philosophers identify 3 camps. There's realism, according to which the number 2 is something which really exists independently of humans. So the number 2 was around 1 billion years ago. It's permanent and unchanging, yada, yada.
Okay.
The second camp is called conceptualism. According to conceptualism, the number 2 does exist in a sense, but it only exists because humans created it.
Right. That's a more common view, right? That's a more common view, right?
And by making it up, we caused it to exist.
Right.
That's conceptualism.
Right.
The third view is nominalism. According to nominalism, the number 2 doesn't exist, but we talk as if it did. We kind of pretend that it exists. So the distinction between conceptualism and nominalism is quite subtle, because according to nominalists, we succeeded in creating it. It's the sort of thing that exists because we think a certain way. And according to nominalism, it doesn't exist in any sense, but we kind of talk as if it existed. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, there are philosophers who thought very hard about the status of abstract entities like the number 2. And one of those is a guy named Dharmakirti, and Dharmakirti is a conceptualist. So the most natural option for me to take would be to adopt the conceptualist view and tell you that, yeah, axioms exist, and numbers exist, and the novel Pride and Prejudice exists. I'm not talking about my copy of Pride and Prejudice. I'm talking about the novel Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
Okay. all these abstract entities exist, but they exist because we kind of made them up. That would be the most logical thing, I think, for me to say in response to your question.
Oh, boy. Okay, and that could lead somewhere else, but someone could say, okay, well, cool, we made God up too, so therefore God exists. But...
well, okay. Now you have to be really careful.
Yes.
Think about the McDonald's Corporation and Barney the dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
I claimed earlier that the McDonald's Corporation exists because all kinds of people act in a certain way and relate to it in a certain way and think a certain way. So, as it were, we collectively bring it into existence through our social practices.
Okay.
On the other hand, consider Barney the dinosaur. Lots of little kids believe in Barney the dinosaur, but that doesn't mean that Barney the dinosaur exists.
Absolutely, right.
Barney the dinosaur does not exist, but these kids think that he exists. So there are some things which are kind of brought into existence by social practices, like the McDonald's Corporation. There are other things where just because a bunch of people believe in them doesn't mean they exist, like Barney. God could be like Barney. And since, as I explained to you last time, Buddhists are atheists, that's the position they should take.
I like that. I got to quote you on that one. I got to make sure God could be like Barney. I like that. Okay, we're running out of time here, but another question from the room here. Does your guest... Let me see. Ask your guest, does the clear light mind exist? Someone is asking.
Yes. So this is a great way of putting pressure on a Buddhist philosopher.
Ah, really?
To determine whether that Buddhist philosopher really takes the emptiness of emptiness seriously.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
So what you do is you take some Buddhist concept which is supposed to express a high level of religious experience.
Right. Okay,
so the clear light mind is a term from Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, but you could just as easily talk about primordial wisdom, what the Tibetans call yeshe. You could talk about the Dharma body of the Buddha. You could talk about the Chiying or the absolute expanse. Okay, and the answer to all of these is, I believe in the emptiness of emptiness, so I'm going to tell you that even the clear light mind...
And explain what that is very quickly if you can.
Yes, even the clear light mind is empty.
Okay.
Everything is empty, even the things you experience through meditation.
What is the clear light mind? Is that the state you're supposed to reach? What is that?
One of them.
Is one of the states of mind you're supposed to...
As you progress through meditation, you achieve more and more advanced states. I highly recommend that you try this.
But you never really reach any particular state because you're always in flux.
Yes, agreed. And moreover, there is no you to reach any of these states.
Exactly. So that's the argument against it. Okay. Right. And your response?
Nevertheless, I think that at the conventional level, if you want to be happy and you want to get out from under the burden of greed, hatred, and delusion that plagues humanity, trying to attain the clear light mind at a conventional level is not such a bad idea. So I recommend that to your listeners. So it sounds like you're saying, as long as that convention is okay, as long as it's practical for you, but yet it doesn't really. Oh wait, it's confusing here. I'm trying to figure out. No, what you were saying was true. Do you value? But you do agree that that many of these things do exist conventionally, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So long as you don't take them to have a kind of existence that they don't have. So long as you don't take things that exist conventionally to exist ultimately, you're fine. But that's exactly what I thought the whole Buddhist thing was all about. Was about reaching a particular state, a moment, I thought that's what it was all. A lot of this was about. I thought. Well, but if it's just conventional, what are we really reaching? Yes. Well, this is an excellent question, and in fact, that question can lead us to ask whether it's possible to become excessively attached to some Buddhist theory. The fact is that what Buddhism is really about is using meditation as a practical tool to calm the mind and overcome suffering. There we go. Practical. That's right. I like that. And what this philosophy is supposed to do is clear away intellectual obstacles.
Understood.
to using meditation as a practical tool
Are you
to
kidding me?
relieve suffering.
Jeez, Charles, it seems like this makes me even more confused. I don't see how my mind could ever be at peace. I'll be too busy thinking about, am I doing, like, now what state am I in currently? Ooh, but that state is past, so where am I really? Can I ever? I don't know, that might drive me crazy, but.
Well, Reggie, it's been very good to talk to you about this stuff. I hope it does not, in fact, make you insane, and I hope that it's of some benefit to some of your listeners.
Yes, and again, thank you, as well for coming on. It's still it really interesting. It gave me a lot to think about. I really like the mental gymnastics and the juggling. And
well, I've enjoyed the challenging questions from your listeners, so thank you, Reggie.
No problem. You're very welcome. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Well, all right, that ends another episode of the Infidel Guy program. This is live, so make sure that you tune in every Wednesday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern to join us live. And I know many of you like to listen to the podcast, but check us out live so that you can get your questions and comments addressed as well. Charles Goodman, wow. The concept of no self. Are you convinced? Not really so sure I am totally. I think that, again, there's still that problem about that Planck time issue, whatever, that it could maybe exist from instant to instant. And that's perfectly fine because our memories assist with the glue that keeps us able to identify who we are as our individual selves. So that's okay. The self exists from moment to moment, and then our memories help glue it all together. It's part of our experience, So anyway, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. But anyway, I'm sure people are going to discuss this in the forum, so let me get this up and ready for podcasting. I'll see you all another time. Thank you for listening and, of course, watching In Reason.